Morning, folks. This is what you do with leftover roasting chicken. We roasted chicken a few days back, and we took the carcass and boiled it down, made some chicken broth. We got the meat, the veggies. We're going to make us some chicken noodle soup and chicken pot pies.
Okay, so we cooked down the chicken carcass in some water. We got our homemade chicken broth from it. So we're going to make, this pot's going to be the chicken soup. We've added some chopped carrots and celery and onions. I've got some garlic powder. As you know, we don't measure anything. Probably a teaspoon of garlic powder. That's a good sized pot. Some parsley, a good handful of parsley. A little bit of oregano, a little bit of basil. And we're going to cook that till the veggies get a little more tender, and then we'll add some chopped up chicken, and when we're ready we'll add some noodles. They'll be the last thing we'll add. They only take about 10 minutes to cook, but right now it just needs to simmer to get the veggies all tender. They'll take a little while. And this is the pot for the chicken pot pie. It's chicken broth, celery, carrots, onion, and some diced potatoes. It's got the same spices, the garlic, parsley. Oh, I forgot, in the soup pot I also put a bay leaf. I haven't put one in here. This is just such a small pot. I just started breaking up the chicken to add to this. We'll let this cook, and when the potatoes are tender we'll thicken it, and then we'll make our pastry pie crust for the pot pie. Okay, so now we're going to thicken the pot pie stuff. Going to make a slurry with just some water and some flour. You could actually use chicken broth and flour as well. About half and half. We'll shake it up good here in the jar until it breaks up the lumps and gets nice and smooth. Okay, now you want your base to be pretty hot, and then you just slowly add your thickening. And it's probably going to take a little more here. And then you want to cook this. It'll thicken some more, and you want to cook it, bring it to boiling and let it boil for a couple minutes, because you want to cook that flour taste out of there, that raw. Otherwise you're going to have a raw flour taste, and that's kind of nasty. So it'll thicken up a little more as it comes to a boil. And then we'll let it cool off a couple of minutes. Well, it needs to come almost to room temperature before we put it in the pastry, otherwise it's going to make your pastry all gooey. And we threw in a handful of green peas when we bring this up to a boil. They don't take long to thaw out, so as I said, you just bring it up to a light boil, let it simmer a couple of minutes so that you can see it bubbling, and it's gotten quite thick already. So now we'll just let it sit and cool off before we add it to the pastry. Now we've got all the chicken added, and I just threw in a couple of big handfuls of noodles. You can see them there. They'll take about 10 minutes to cook up. All of this is added to your proportions to what you like. This is the way we like things, so about 10 minutes those noodles will be done and it'll be soup. Okay, so I'm making the pie crust that we're going to line the bowls with and the tops. What I've got is 3 cups of flour, regular flour, with 1 teaspoon of salt, and we're going to cut in a cup and a half of shortening. I prefer Crisco. I just think it works better than the other cheaper brands. We'll get this cut in until it's very small pieces, and then we'll add our moisture. Okay, so this is what you want. You want the mixture into small little pieces once the shortening's all cut in. Now we're going to add the liquids. What I've got is 1/3 of a cup of milk with 3 tablespoons of vinegar added to it, and just stir it together well and let it sit for a minute. And I'm going to add this slowly, and I'm not going to add all of it because sometimes you'll need more, sometimes you'll need less. I like to just mix a little at a time. And You really want to not over mix your pie crust because then it gets tough, but just kind of use a fork, stir it in until it starts coming together. And this is going to need a little more. It'll probably wind up taking it all, but let's see what we get. And it's been 10 minutes and you'll see the noodles are cooked. See them there. And so you just turn it off. You'll want to let it sit a couple of minutes because it's pretty boiling hot, and the noodles will continue to cook and expand a little bit. But it's done. Smells good. And I wound up having to add it all of the liquid here. So what we're going to do is just take your hands and kind of gather it to a ball. You want to handle this as little as possible, but just kind of gather it up into a bowl, and then we'll divide it in half. This is a 2 crust, and we'll roll it out. So we got it on the floured board. We're just going to try and roll out a little bit here. Roll it out to fit whatever pans you're using. Keep it moving, keep it flipping so that it doesn't stick. Like it is. You'll want to roll it out to fit whatever dish you're using, and I'm just going to trim around the edges a little bit here, and we'll need to trim it more once I get it in our dish, but this is a good start so that it doesn't have to be perfect. It's homemade, and nothing I make is perfect, so tastes good, doesn't always look perfect.
That's all that matters.
So we're going to kind of fit it down into this bowl. I think these are, I'm not sure if they're 8-ounce or 10-ounce cups that we use. So you kind of ease your pastry down in. You don't want to tug it too much because you'll tear it like I just did, but that's fine. We'll patch it up. So ease it down in there. Make it fit. And then we'll trim off a little of the extra. You want to leave a little bit there so that you can tuck under the top lid. We like both top and bottoms on our pot pies, but if you don't like the bottom, you can just do a top crust. So just kind of press out all the bumps and fit it down in there and patch the holes. This dough is pretty forgiving to work with here from the looks of it. This is my first time using this pastry recipe, so we'll find out how it turns out. Looks like it's going to be pretty good. And there's a little tear here. I just take an extra piece of dough and patch it on. Nobody's going to see it. It's all going to taste the same. Now we'll fill these. I've got 2 of these. We'll fill them and put the top on them, and they'll be ready to bake. Now we've got the thickened and slightly cooled filling. So we're going to fill these pretty full here. There. Will boil over a little bit, so you want to be careful not to get them too awful full. And we have enough filling here. We're going to do 4. Now just to put the top crust on, and now we're just going to cut out the toppings. I have found that I have a 6-pound Crisco can that I'm using the lid. It fits well on those, so I just floured it a little and use that as my cutting disc. Now, when you have leftover pie crust, spread it with a little bit of butter, softened butter, sprinkle it with some cinnamon sugar, roll it up, cut it in like you would cut cinnamon rolls, just a little thin little half-inch things, and bake them in the oven. They're nice little treats. Kids love them, and adults do too.
Say, don't forget the big kids.
And we'll just put the lid, try to center it, kind of just pinch the edges together with the lower crust as best you can. You can do with the edges what you want. We'll do a little flute here. If you've got too much with the under crust, you can trim. As I said, it's homemade. It's not supposed to look store-bought. Just needs to taste good. We're going to cut a couple slits in this to let the steam escape. If you want to get really fancy, you can brush it with an egg wash. It'll make your crust a little shiny on top. I don't bother. It doesn't add anything to the taste, so this is just for me. I'll cut a couple holes. Just a couple little slits. And we'll bake them at 350 till the crust is nicely browned, and you'll see it bubbling. Probably anywhere 30 minutes, maybe a little longer. I would check them at least 30 to see how they're coming. They're small. I've rolled out the extra pie crust dough. This dough re-rolls very nicely, by the way. Just needs lots of flour on the board. I've spread it with some softened butter or margarine, whatever you prefer. Sprinkle it with some cinnamon sugar. You can use as much or as little as you want. It would also be good with a little brown sugar and cinnamon as well. And then we're just going to roll them up. I can remember my mom making these when I was a kid with a leftover pie crust, because we didn't have much money, we didn't have much treats, so this was a treat when we could get it. And we're just going to cut these into little pieces, put them on a baking sheet. I would say bake them at 350. Probably I would check them in 10 minutes. I wouldn't think they'd take much more than 15. And just let them cool a little bit, and they are very tasty. They don't spread at all, so you can put them fairly close, but just kind of put them on there. I line my cookie sheet and grease it because it just makes it a lot easier to clean. And if you want, you can sprinkle a little extra cinnamon sugar on top. Can't ever have too much cinnamon sugar. We'll throw them in the oven. And there's your chicken noodle soup. And you can basically add any veggie you like to this. Yeah, you'll see they're lightly browned on the bottoms. And there'll be a little firm on the sides when you touch them. Those took about 13 minutes at 350. So with the leftover, what we did 2 of the little round ones, and then we just did a big one instead of bothering to make 2 more small ones. So we baked it, lined it with the pie crust, filled that, and baked this about 40 minutes at 350. And it's going to fall apart coming out. But it'll all taste good.
Oh yeah.